Welcome along, everybody, to my 2025 F1 teammate head-to-head predictions. We're going to be predicting who will come out on top in both the qualifying head-to-head and the race head-to-head. Let's get into the very first team. Are you ready? It is Sauber. So in qualifying, I think Nico Hülkenberg is going to win 15-9. And in the race, I think it's going to be 14-10. Maybe a bit more closer than what some people would expect. The thing that's interesting about this driver pairing is we got Bortoleto, who's a two-time champion, just like Oscar Piastri, just like Charles Leclerc, just like George Russell as well, I believe, going back-to-back F3, F2 championship, coming into Formula 1. Now, we've seen how talented those drivers are. Will Bortoleto be able to live up to that, not necessarily hype, but live up to that level? The thing that Hülkenberg needs to adjust to is he's moving teams. Obviously, he's been used to that Haas. I'd favor the experienced driver a lot more, typically. I don't know. I just have a lot of trust in Bortoleto this season, but I think he's got a lot to prove, and I think he's very, very talented. I think Hülkenberg is going to be very strong in qualifying, like he normally is, but I think Bortoleto has a lot of raw speed. Then in the race, I've obviously ticked it one more over towards Bortoleto because, yeah, I just think Bortoleto race pace will get better over the season. I don't think Hülkenberg was that strong in race pace last season. I think this battle will be a lot spicier in 2026 when both drivers have adapted to the car, but also they've both not got, hopefully, a shit car. Moving on to Williams. I have got Sainz beating Albon 14-10 in qualifying and Sainz beating Albon 15-9 in the race. This is a big matchup this year. I think overall it is going to be a pretty tight battle, but I think Sainz just has that edge in consistency. Albon in 2023 was amazing in both qualifying and race pace. Last year, though, I feel like we started to see Albon become a little bit inconsistent. We saw moments like Australia where he crashed. I think Sainz will be coming into this team and he's going to bring what he learned from Ferrari, from McLaren, from Renault into quickly adapting to the car. And we've already seen in testing how quick he's adapted. Even Albon said himself. Now, that obviously doesn't reflect to on-track performance, but again, I think Sainz has proven over the years he has that consistency. How good actually is Albon? You know, we saw him come into Toro Rosso. He did good against Kvyat, but that's Kvyat. He then came into Red Bull and he did okay, but ultimately he ended up getting dropped in the end. He got kicked out of the sport, came into Williams. He had Latifi as a teammate, and then he had Logan Sargent as a teammate. And then once Franco Colapinto came in, Colapinto started to do pretty good and put that pressure on Albon. And we know Albon in his Red Bull days didn't have the best mindset. I feel like he kind of fell into a spiral bit. Will he fall into that spiral with Carlos Sainz beating him? Or will he kind of accept being the second driver of that team? It'll be interesting. Moving on to the next team, Racing Bulls. I have got Yuki Tsunoda beating Isaac Hadjar 18-6 in qualifying and 17-7 in the race. Now that I'm looking at this after I've done them, I kind of feel like I've been too generous on Hadjar. But the thing is, Hadjar is once again coming in as another driver this season where we have no clue how he's going to do. Keep in mind, Yuki has gone up against Daniel Ricciardo and the head-to-head was somewhat close, although the standards for Daniel Ricciardo should have been higher. Yuki obliterated Liam in the head-to-head, but again, in terms of qualifying and race pace, they were somewhat similar. And that's kind of what makes me think, okay, if Daniel was close and Liam was close, but the thing is, I don't rate Hadjar as high as Liam, as high as Daniel. Those qualifyings where Yuki makes a mistake, or those races where Yuki makes a mistake and Hadjar's able to capitalize on it. But I think Hadjar's going to be making a lot of mistakes on his own. Does that mean that Hadjar's done a bad job? No, you know, Yuki's come into his 5th season of Formula 1 now. He's expected to do well. Next up, we have got the Haas boys, and I've got Ollie Behrman, the rookie, to beat Ocon this season in the head-to-head. 14-10 in qualifying and 13-11 in the race. First off, I want to get out of the way. I think this is going to be a very, very close battle, but I think Behrman has proved that in F2 and F1 even, in his appearances, he has a lot of raw talent, and Behrman is used to that Ferrari, you know, that simulated Ferrari. Haas are using a Ferrari engine, whereas Ocon is moving from a Renault engine. He has been at Renault Alpine for how many years? 4 years? So he's coming to a new team in a new environment. I think a lot of people underestimate how much the feel of an engine in a car makes to a team. You know, we saw Daniel Ricciardo leaving a Renault engine, going to another Renault engine team. He was fucking amazing. But as soon as he went to McLaren with a different engine, a Mercedes engine, he sucked. I think this season is going to show why Ocon is a mid driver at best. I think Ocon is good at being like, all right, this race I'm showing up and getting a podium, or this race I'm getting points, and he delivers. But a lot of races, I just feel like he's off the pace, inconsistent, makes mistakes. You know, I think the big talking point is how long are these guys going to get along for before that falls apart? Or is it going to be a fresh new start for Ocon? In terms of qualifying, I think Behrman in F2 showed how good of a qualifier he is. Remember F2, I think 2023, Azerbaijan, he had broken steering and he still put that car on pole. He's so good extracting everything out of that car. And I think just like Hülkenberg excelled in qualifying for Haas. I think Behrman's going to do the same. I can't see a world where Ocon dominates or Behrman dominates. I can only see one of them slightly beating each other or being really, really close. Moving on to Alpine. I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? I have got Gasly to dominate, doing both 20-4 in qualifying and 20-4 in the race. You might be sitting here and going, wow, you're being quite generous to doing. I do think Gasly has a little bit of inconsistency in him, especially in that Alpine at the moment. And there will be a few races or qualifyings where Gasly makes a mistake and Doohan's able to capitalize on it. But I think the biggest talking point is Alpine already seem ready to drop Doohan and get Colapinto in that car. I do think there is a chance where Doohan lasts the whole season, but I think that pressure of Colapinto, I think that's going to play a big effect into those first 6 races. Ultimately, I don't think he's going to adapt to the car quick enough. He'll crumble, and I think they'll just swap him out for Colapinto. That's my prediction. I think everything's pointing to that happening. But if he does last the whole season, which I've done these teammate head-to-heads based off of, I do think there'll be a few races where Doohan's able to capitalize on the qualifying and race head-to-head. Obviously, the head-to-head was close between Gasly and Ocon last season, but at the end of the season, when the car was top tier, Gasly was on another level. And I think we're going to start off that season with that car in a similar spot. And I think Gasly's going to just keep building and building and building from that. Moving on to Aston Martin. I have got Fernando Alonso beating Stroll 20-4 in qualifying and 19-5 in the race. I think some people would argue that this should be higher, but if you look at the head-to-head last year, this is basically what it was last year. You know, Stroll did take a few races off of Alonso because of certain instances and stuff like that. That's bound to happen. Obviously, Alonso is a much better, more experienced driver. I think if Alonso had a championship winning car, Alonso would 24-0 Stroll. I think there could even be a world where Stroll gets even more than 5, 6, or 7 in the head-to-head, solely because I don't know if Alonso, when given a back of the grid car, cares enough to put in that extra work in qualifying in the race, even to a level where I think he comes into qualifying going, my car's shit, I'm just going to try everything, try something different, doesn't work out well, and Stroll just kind of finishes ahead of him. Same in the race. But yeah, I think realistically, Alonso will majorly beat Stroll in the head-to-head, but I don't think it's going to be 24-0 like some people will say, because it's never been a 24-0 for Alonso in the last few years. So why would it just randomly be a 24-0 now? Moving on to the big 4 teams, we've got Mercedes. I've got George Russell 19-5 in qualifying and 18-6 in the race. Yeah, I honestly think Russell is going to majorly beat Antonelli this season. I think there's a lot of hype around Antonelli, which is understandable with his junior career. You know, for people who don't know, Antonelli absolutely wiped the floor and dominated his junior career in both karting and open wheel cars. But he skipped F3, went straight to F2, kind of struggled in F2, got the opportunity to get into F1. His one practice session in F1, he went and binned it in the wall straight away, which kind of goes to show that lack of experience. Maybe he was pushing too hard. Maybe it was just a genuine mistake. But either way, the thing is, I don't think Antonelli's going to have a bad season. I think he's going to get points. He'll be near Russell's pace. I just think Russell last year dominated Lewis Hamilton in qualifying pace and in the qualifying head-to-head. And Lewis Hamilton's a 7-time world champion. He's now going up against a rookie who's 18 years old, who's never driven an F1 car. So I can't see a world where Russell doesn't dominate Antonelli in qualifying. The thing is, we don't know how good or bad Antonelli's going to be. And there is that part of me inside me that's like, Antonelli's just going to lock in straight away off the bat beyond the pace. We move on now to Red Bull. And I've got Verstappen dominating Liam 22-2 in qualifying and 22-2 in the race. I just don't see a world where Liam Lawson outperforms Max Verstappen consistently over the season. Does that mean I think Liam's going to do bad? Absolutely not. I think he's going to surprise people who are hating on him right now. I think he's going to be more on the pace and more consistent than Sergio Perez as he builds up over time. I think he's got the right mindset. But Max Verstappen has annihilated all his teammates. He's annihilated Gasly. He's annihilated Albon. He's annihilated Perez. Max Verstappen doesn't make mistakes. He is the best driver in the sport at the moment. So there is no world that Liam Lawson or any driver on the grid, in my opinion, is going to beat Max Verstappen in the head-to-head at his home team. So when you put a rookie who is learning the car up against the best driver on the grid, it is going to be an annihilation. You know, some people might even argue it should be 24-0, but you know, there will be a few races and qualifyings where Max does have a problem or make a mistake and Liam's able to capitalize that. And I do think Liam is that driver where if Max has a collision in the race, he'll be able to capitalize and get those points. Next up, we've got Ferrari. Leclerc, obviously his home stomping ground, just like Max Verstappen. And we've got Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion, moving teams. I've got Leclerc winning the qualifying head-to-head 19-5, and the race a little bit more in Lewis's favor, but still in favor of Leclerc 15-9. 19-5? What? Let's not forget, Leclerc is arguably the best qualifier on the grid. He has been dominating in qualifying for years now, both Sainz and Vettel. Whenever Leclerc has the car, even when he doesn't have the car, like there's races and qualifyings where he's a third, fourth best car and he's putting on pole, right? Comparing him to Hamilton. Hamilton's race pace last year was phenomenal, but he still finished behind Russell in the race head-to-head. And in qualifying, he got dominated by Russell. So explain to me how Leclerc, a better qualifier, won't dominate Lewis Hamilton, a poor qualifier at the moment in this generation of car, at his home team. Again, I hope I'm proven wrong. This is not me hating on Lewis. This is just me putting my predictions where my mouth is, I guess. In terms of the race, I do think Hamilton's race pace is obviously very strong. We saw that last year. But again, just like in qualifying, if Leclerc is starting 3 positions up the grid and that's extra work you have to do, yes, your race pace is strong, but Leclerc also has good race pace. There'll be a lot of races, I think, where Leclerc qualifies P2 and Lewis qualifies P3, and then they'll swap in the race, whether it be strategy, whether it be race pace, and I think it will come down closer. But I think at the end of the day, just like last season, just like 2023, just like 2022, qualifying will let Lewis down, and it doesn't matter how good his race pace is, it will not save Lewis in the head-to-head. And if he does go on to beat Leclerc, I'm not going to sit here and be like, nah, that's fake. I'm going to be like, wow, Lewis is killing it. He's proved me wrong. But my prediction, he isn't. Why would I sit here and be a pussy and be like, you know what, guys? This one's too close to call. I think it's going to be 12-12. No, because I don't think that. And I hope Lewis proves me wrong and someone can come clip this and it becomes a meme, because that would be funny. I don't see a world where Lewis gets more than 8 on the McLaren qualifyings. Moving on to McLaren, the Constructors Champions. We've got Lando. You know, based off of the last couple of seasons and the current form of both drivers, I have got Lando 17-7 in qualifying, and I've got 15-9 in the race. I think Oscar's biggest weakness is qualifying at the moment. Qualifying consistency. I think Piastri has the pace, but his consistency in qualifying, specifically in the last season, wasn't great. If you look at the head-to-head, Norris annihilated Piastri 19-6 or something like that. It was quite big. So I think that is going to flow over into this season. Even though Piastri's qualifying consistency might get a little bit better, I still think Norris is going to have that pace over him. And then in the race, I think Piastri's biggest weakness is race pace. Okay, then why have you given a 2-rate swing towards Piastri in comparison to qualifying? I think Norris will continue to have those mistakes in the race. I do think he has a refresh mindset, and I do think he's going to build off of what he did last season, but I still think Norris is going to fall into that pressure pool of the championship, make those mistakes. I don't have faith in McLaren either to favor one driver, which I think will open the door to Piastri to be able to get a few races on Norris. Some people might look at this and be like, well, you're harsh on Oscar. He's in his 3rd year of Formula 1. I still think Lando is better than him in qualifying pace. I still think Lando is better than him in race pace. I still think Lando is the better driver, although them as teammates is a lot closer than some people think. Like Max over Liam, like Leclerc over Lewis, I still think Lando will consistently outperform Piastri. I don't think we're just going to click our fingers and Piastri just instantly becomes consistently on Lando's pace. This is the problem with McLaren, right? Piastri finishes 1 position behind Lando in the race, or 1 position behind Lando in qualifying, and they go, see, our drivers are very close. We have 2 number 1 drivers. But then we actually break it down, like the qualifying gap will be 2/10, or the race pace will be 20 seconds. And it's like, no, you have to favor Lando because he is the better driver overall.
There's no need to complicate things. Let's stick to the basics.